Mr. Jones, you will see in the evidence, not only produced this music, he produced music videos. Videos where he would travel to the gravesides of these individuals and do things during the video like lay on their graves and sing around their graves and use sarcastic lyrics in his songs, pour champagne on their graves, rubbing it in the faces of ATK and 1200. And ATK and 1200 were no better. They did the same thing. This created in those 5 individuals, in their minds and in their hearts, a vendetta. This was revenge because he ridiculed them and he ridiculed their gang, which was their family. He ridiculed their friends, which were their family members. They were close, deep running bonds of loyalty in this organization because they have each other and they defend each other.
Feel like Century, he didn't make it. And I just lost it. I'm like, okay. I say, where they at? They're like, they took them to different hospitals. I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna get ready to go to Tampa. And then I was like, they're like, but Foolio car still right there. Dang. And I'm like, somebody must be dead. But I ain't thinking it's him because he done got shot so many times. I'm like, but they say everybody was rushed to all these different hospitals. So I'm like, okay, let me go or whatever. So as I'm going to, we biking out, finna go to Tampa, a friend of mine called me because his son was shot too or whatever. He was like, Century, he didn't make it. And I just lost it. I lost it. And I just seen ATF, FBI, everybody there. And I'm like, it still wasn't, didn't click. It still wasn't believable until I was able to see him or whatever, which they wouldn't let me see him or whatever. But when I talked to them, it's still unbelievable, like to this day, that he is gone.
For sure. It's definitely unbelievable for like a lot of the fans.
Okay, very good, Madam Clerk.
Yes.
Please publish the verdict.
In the Circuit Court of the 13th Judicial Circuit of the State of Florida, in and for Hillsborough County Criminal Justice Division, State of Florida versus Alicia Latoya Andrews, case number 24 CF 1911996, Trial Division 1, verdict form. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1, the defendant is guilty of manslaughter, a lesser included offense. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2, the defendant is not guilty. So say we all, dated this 31st day of October 2025, signed foreperson of the jury.
All right, thank you very much. Have a seat. Satisfied with me to poll the jury?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Imagine thinking a case is finished, and then the judge gets removed. That is exactly where the murder case tied to Julio Foolio stands right now. Not because the evidence disappeared, not because witnesses changed their stories, but because an appellate court decided the courtroom itself may not have been fair. And when a court says that, everything stops. The focus shifts from the defendant to the judge. Foolio was in Tampa celebrating his birthday when the night ended in a fatal ambush outside a hotel. Within days, investigators announced arrests. 5 people were charged. The state moved fast, and Alicia Andrews became the first person to go to trial. Prosecutors walked into court confident. They believed they had a tight digital timeline. They presented phone records, surveillance, travel routes, and text message patterns. After days of testimony, the jury returned a verdict of manslaughter instead of first-degree murder. That verdict alone told a story. The jury believed she played a role, but they were not convinced she fully intended for someone to die. For many people watching, it looked like the case was moving toward closure. Then the appeal landed like a bomb. The defense did not argue that the evidence was fake. They did not argue that the state had no case. They argued something more dangerous for the prosecution. They argued that Alicia Andrews did not receive a fair trial because the judge showed bias throughout the proceedings. And the appellate court agreed enough to remove the judge from the case. That is rare. That is serious. And that is why this entire just slowed down. Let's talk about what triggered this. During jury selection, Mind the defense asked to remove potential jurors who admitted they did not understand rap lyrics or the culture connected to the case. Their argument was that the prosecution's theory leaned heavily on understanding communication, movement, and context tied to that culture. If jurors openly said they did not understand it, the defense argued they could misinterpret intent. The The judge denied several of those requests. That decision became the first pillar of the appeal. Then came opening statements. According to the appeal, the judge told both sides they would have 1 hour for opening statements. The prosecution went over that time. When the defense tried to object and ask for equal time, the appeal claims the judge dismissed the concern and shifted the explanation. The defense pointed to the court record and audio, to saying the time rule had been clearly set and then unevenly applied. Opening statements are not small moments. They frame how jurors see everything that follows. If one side gets extra space to shape the narrative, that matters. But the appeal did not stop there. The defense said they were repeatedly shut down when trying to preserve objections. Requests to step aside for legal discussion away from the jury were often denied. They argued that they were rushed while presenting evidence and cross-examining witnesses, while the state had days to lay out its case without pressure. One detail stood out. The judge reportedly told the jury several times that the case would be finished by a certain day and they would begin deliberating before the defense had even finished presenting witnesses. That created pressure. The defense argued that this signaled to the jury that the timeline mattered more than hearing the full case. Put simply, the defense said the courtroom felt tilted. The appellate court did not rule on guilt. It did not say the evidence was weak. It focused on whether the judge's conduct created an appearance of bias. That was enough for the court to remove her from the case and pause sentencing. For Foolio's family, this was devastating. They had a verdict. They were moving toward closure. And now, the finish line moved. Grief does not understand legal procedure. It understands loss and waiting. Publicly, emotions ran high. Frustration poured out about how a conviction could be delayed over what some call technical issues. But this is the hard truth about the legal system. Even when evidence is strong, the process must be clean. Because if courts allow uneven trials for people we think are guilty, the same rules can harm someone who is not. That principle is bigger than this case. Now let's talk about the evidence that led to the original conviction, because this part matters too. Prosecutors showed that Alicia Andrews and her boyfriend traveled from Jacksonville to Tampa the same night Foolio was moving around the city. Phone pings placed her near multiple locations tied to him. Surveillance showed them sitting in parking lots outside venues without entering. Text message timing allegedly matched the movement of the shooters. They followed him to the hotel. Shortly after messages were sent, gunfire erupted. Later, the shooters allegedly showed up at an Airbnb she had rented. The next day, they all drove back to Jacksonville together. And that timeline convinced the jury she was involved, but perhaps did not fully know the end result would be murder. That is why the verdict landed on manslaughter. Her defense argued she was caught in something she did not fully understand, and that she was influenced by her boyfriend. The judge ruled that argument could not excuse participation in a deadly event. That ruling stood, but the appeal said the way the entire trial was handled undermined fairness. And now that appeal changed everything, there is also a ripple effect that people are not talking about enough. 4 other defendants are still waiting for trial. Their attorneys are studying every detail of what happened in this courtroom. If the first trial raised concerns about fairness, you can bet those concerns will be raised again in the others. That slows the entire process and makes prosecutors work even harder to make sure everything is airtight. This is how one courtroom decision can shake an entire case. So what happens now? A new judge takes over. The defense may push for a completely new trial. The prosecution may argue the verdict should stand because the evidence was strong and the jury spoke. Both sides have real arguments. If a new trial happens, everything starts again. Same witnesses, same digital timeline, same evidence, different courtroom, different rulings, different atmosphere. If a new trial does not happen, sentencing moves forward under a new judge. Either way, this case is no longer near the end. It is back in motion. This situation highlights 2 difficult truths at the same time. A man lost his life and his family wants justice. And a woman accused of helping set that up is entitled to a trial that is unquestionably fair. When those 2 truths collide, courts move slowly and carefully. That is where this case sits right now. And until the next ruling, nothing is settled. Before you click away, pause for a second and really think about what you just heard. This case is no longer just about who did what that night. It's about how the system handles cases when emotions are high, evidence is strong, And the courtroom itself comes under scrutiny. That's what makes this situation so different from most stories you hear online. What happened to Julio Foolio was tragic. A life was lost in a violent way that shook an entire city. But what's happening now inside the courts shows how complicated justice really is. A verdict was reached. A family thought closure was coming. Always then one legal move changed the entire direction of the case. Not because new evidence appeared, but because the process itself was questioned. And this is where things get serious. Because if a trial isn't handled correctly, everything that came out of it can be challenged. That's why this appeal matters. That's why the judge being removed matters. And that's why this case is far from over. The next steps could reshape everything. A new trial, a new ruling, or the original verdict standing under new supervision. No one knows yet. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next in this case, because the updates are coming fast. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the appeal was justified, or should the verdict have stood? Let's talk about it.